Briahna, what's on your radar?
Well, it's midterm election season, and you know what that means. It's time for Democrats to find someone to blame for their failures. Joe Biden came into power claiming that he had a mandate. He was going to do what Trump wouldn't. End COVID, pass meaningful criminal justice reform, dish out $2,000 checks, cancel at least $10,000 of student debt, and even cure cancer.
I promise you, if I'm elected president, you're going to see the single most important thing that changes in America is we're going to cure cancer. But that's another issue.
Needless to say, cancer remains tragically uncured, and other self-imposed goals like canceling student debt, dispersing $2,000 checks, passing the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act by the one-year anniversary of George Floyd's murder, and canceling at least $10,000 of student debt remain unaccomplished. During the 2020 campaign, when America was at 220,000 COVID deaths, Biden said of Trump that anyone who is responsible for that many deaths should not remain as president of the United States. At the time, America was at 220,000 COVID deaths, and now it's at 1 million. Questions about student debt cancellation from the press box are met with condescension from Jen Psaki, who dishonestly offers that if Congress were to send a student debt cancellation bill to Biden's desk, he would sign it, even though she knows that the same executive authority he and Trump have relied on to suspend student debt payments could be used to cancel student debt altogether, without the participation of Congress. And of course, $2,000 checks immediately became $1,400 checks. According to a recent CBS poll, Biden's approval ratings are at a new low. He's getting low marks for handling inflation, and although many high costs are the result of COVID-related supply chain issues and corporate price gouging, his attempt to brand the issue as the Putin price hike is unlikely to endear him to anyone who doesn't already have a Biden-Harris sticker sign in the window of their brownstone. But establishment Democrats seem to see no relationship between the party's failure to meet the moment and Biden's flagging poll numbers. Instead of using his executive authority to deliver on his promises to the American people by, for example, canceling student debt or expanding Medicare to cover all citizens in response to the COVID crisis, both actions within his power. According to a new book by New York Times reporters Jonathan Martin and Alex Burns, set to be released this May, Pelosi privately blames progressives for nearly costing the Democrats the House, saying Representatives Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Pramila Jayapal were fighting to be, quote, Queen Bee. Quote, in a few strictly confidential conversations, she pointed a finger leftward. Pelosi told one senior lawmaker that Democrats had alienated Asian and Hispanic immigrants with loose talk of socialism. According to a review of the book, in some of the same communities, the Italian Catholic speaker said Democrats had not been careful enough about the way they spoke about abortion among new Americans who were devout people of faith. Now, left punching by corporate Democrats is nothing new. Although Nancy Pelosi is the subject of more than 1/3 of conservative attack ads, her policies are never to blame for the frustrations with the party. We live in a mind-boggling reality where Nancy Pelosi can publicly defend Congress members who are often privy to insider information, participating in stock trading, while accusing socialism of being at the root of low poll numbers. Now, I'm old enough to remember back in November 2020 when Representative Jim Clyburn warned that if, quote, we are going to run on Medicare for all, defund the police, socialize medicine, we're not going to win the upcoming runoff Senate contest in Georgia. Representative Kurt Schrader of the conservative Blue Dog Coalition warned that, quote, when we see the far left that gets all the news media attention, they get scared. This playing footsies with socialism is not going to win over most of America, agreed Representative Stephanie Murphy, co-chair of the Blue Dogs. There's no amount of lipstick that can cover up the fact that these far left ideas are costing us races. But Medicare for All won on the ballot in 2020, including in some conservative swing districts. As Branko Markovic reported at the time, Matt Cartwright won his election in that year by 3.4 points in Pennsylvania's 8th district, which has been represented by a Republican for 14 of the last 20 years and has voted for Obama twice before voting for Trump in 2016. He did this despite not just co-sponsoring Medicare for All, but going on Fox News to make the case for it. Likewise, after winning a 2018 special election for an open seat in Pennsylvania's 7th district, Susan Wild won re-election to the seat for the second time in a district whose Republican tilting voting patterns are nearly identical to Pennsylvania's 8th. She won in spite of being on the receiving end of exactly the kind of GOP attacks that other Democrat supporters of Medicare for All have been subjected to. So despite the evidence, Democratic strategists are now arguing that the way to win is to shift right. Again, as Leah Hunt Hendricks noted in a recent op-ed for Politico, this is a mistake. She wrote, "Some Democrats and like-minded commentators have urged the party to veer to the right. The Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee has urged lawmakers to denounce amnesty for immigrants and tout their support for police." State columnist Jordan Weissman suggested that maybe Democrats need to offer some serious concessions on culture war issues, and political scientist Roy Teixeira recently wrote, "All the political signals are screaming, Democrats must move to the center." But Leah argues persuasively that's the wrong move. This is a terrible approach, not just morally, but politically. The idea that criticizing people whose energy and dedication helps power Democratic victories will somehow yield political benefits for Democrats is both wrong and self-defeating. Any successful strategy must unify all elements of the party's coalition. Notably, Democrats are not just suffering from low approval ratings among independents, they are also registering low ratings among key elements of the base, such as young people and people of color. They face a double-digit enthusiasm gap compared to Republicans. Punching down at core constituencies within the party is virtually guaranteed to depress turnout and lead to deep losses in November. In fact, many swing district Democrats tried a strategy of promoting their centrist bona fides above all else in 2020, and it led to major losses. Democrats spend 3 times more on television ads touting bipartisanship than Republicans. And to what effect? Republicans go on the offense, tagging words like extremist and radical. And those tags stick because Democrats refused to tell an affirmative story about who they are. Leah rightly identifies a core truth. When Republicans paint Democrats as too woke, what really lands is the idea that they are elite, out of touch with the core needs of Americans. The core needs Biden said he would address when he ran for office, but which he has largely failed to follow through on. Specifically, Leah argues, Democrats should focus on issues that deliver concrete benefits to working Americans and which motivate their voters to show up to the polls. Canceling student debt would disproportionately benefit Americans at the lower ends of the economic scale, while meanwhile failing to act will likely lead to a fall-off in turnout, according to a recent poll. 40% of Black voters and 30% of all Democratic voters say they might stay home in 2022 without debt cancellation. Now, student debt cancellation can be done by executive order. Biden can't use Manchin and Sinema as an excuse for this one. So it's unclear why Nancy Pelosi wouldn't take this route to growing enthusiasm among the base rather than attacking them for wanting something in exchange for their vote. Maybe it has something to do with being lobbied by billionaire, close family friends, and consistent donors to oppose student debt cancellation, as reported by The Intercept last year. But one thing is clear. Left punching isn't going to go away as long as corporate Democrats need an excuse for their own failures. And as long as it happens, the left needs to learn to effectively punch back. True progressives need to name the enemy to promote a genuine progressive populism. The battle isn't left-right, it's top-down. And it's time for working people to reject parties that want to throw them and their interests under the bus and start punching up. Now, Robbie, I know this is an old battle cry of mine, and you probably feel differently about the culture war aspect of this, at least.
I don't feel entirely differently. I try never, ever again in my life to make the mistake of thinking the things I like and think are correct policies are necessarily popular. Probably some of the things I think are correct policies are popular. Many of them are not. And the same goes for every other political coalition and anyone trying. It's always fun to go, yes, my ideas are winning. Everyone loves them. If only they enacted them, everything would be great. And it might be true policy-wise, but not true political-wise. So with the things you're talking about, I do think, even though Medicare for all type policies are not exactly my favorite thing, they are clearly popular. You should not call them socialism, though, because socialism is not popular. Well, many of the ideas that we can argue are socialist are popular, if not described as socialism, because people associate correctly, in my view, socialism with political repression and economic collapse.
I think
so
that's
you just
fine.
Don't call it socialism.
I don't care if you call it socialism or not, but regardless, anything a Democrat does, even a corporate Democrat does, is going to get called socialism, and that's what's so frustrating.
True. Yeah.
You see these ads with Nancy Pelosi in them, calling Nancy Pelosi a socialist, and yet somehow the response is not to say, well, she's being called out for being an elitist, she's being called out for being corrupt, let's change those things about the Democratic Party. It's to say, let's take the few good things that the Democrats are running on that are, in fact, genuinely and sincerely popular, and accuse progressives of hurting the party for actually pushing those things. And let's also absolve Joe Biden of his responsibility for acting on those things that he actually can do in his singular executive authority to help Americans feel better in the context of this ongoing economic crisis.
Yeah. Do them, just don't call them socialists, would honestly be my advice. On that stuff, on the culture war, I mean, we'll have to see. I think Democrats are going to have to come up with a better or more satisfying strategy than the one you outlined there, because it's it's.
I mean, I don't think that they should fight it.
I'm not sure what they can do, frankly. I think
you have to talk about something else. I think going tit for tat about this is what CRT means, no, this is what CRT means, and no, it's not actually taught in school, and no, it's taught in law schools, yada, yada, yada. Like, I can have substantive beliefs and opinions about all of that, but my communications advice to people would be to talk about something that people care more about, instead of always being tricked into coming and fighting on the turf that is going to be more advantageous to the right. There is a reason why conservatives benefit from talking about culture war things, because they are more popular than the underlying policies that the conservatives are offering right now.
Sure.
That doesn't have to be true for the left unless you ignore those things that are actually progressive policies.
True, but they're popular to some extent. They're things conservatives want to talk about because they realize how much people are frustrated about these things. Like, there is an appetite among the public for the conservative complaint of these things. There is an appetite,
but I recommend that Democrats and progressives not feed the beast. Regardless, I'm looking forward to your radar next, Robbie.
Thank you.